Hello, Bob Reedfield here, preaching and teaching minister of the Spring Hill Christian Church of rural Oak, Lockney, Georgia. And welcome to another lesson, Lesson 10, on the Doctrine of God. Today we are starting Section 4 of this lesson on special providence. We're going to talk about, it's called the sovereign. We're going to talk about the nature of sovereignty. We're going to talk about the attributes of sovereignty and the intimacy of sovereignty. So get your notes, do whatever you need to do, and we're going to go ahead and begin by talking about the nature of sovereignty. The essence of sovereignty is absolute lordship. To say that God is Lord over all things means that He owns all things. The essence of lordship is ownership. This is expressed in the concept of the kingdom or the kingship of God. See Psalm 22, verse 28, Psalm 47, verse 2, Psalm 103, verse 19, and then Revelation chapter 15, verse 3. His lordship is absolute. He is King of kings and Lord of lords, the highest. Deuteronomy 10:17, and then 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 15 and 16, as well as Revelation chapter 19 and verse 16. He is Lord of all. Joshua 3:11. Psalm 97:9, and Acts chapter 10, verse 36. He is God Most High. Genesis chapter 14:20, Psalm 57, verse 2, and Psalm 78, verse 35. And see as well 1 Timothy chapter 6:15 again. The ground of sovereignty is creation from nothing. Sovereign authority is based on creation. Because He is creator, God has the absolute right to rule. Sovereign freedom is based on creation. Because He is creator, God is free to do as He pleases toward His creation. Psalm 115:3, Psalm 135:6. Also remember that God doesn't act or do anything outside of His character. I don't want you to get the idea that He would do evil things. The expression of sovereignty, God's sovereignty, is expressed basically in terms of control. How does He exercise control? Through decision. God makes decisions that establish the basic ends and means of the universe. Causation. Though He does not cause everything, He causes whatever He desires to cause. Note, decision and causation are the only things really needed in deterministic sovereignty. Command. Free will creatures are controlled by divine commands which we are obligated to obey. Permission. Though we act with relative independence, we do nothing, and nothing happens to us unless God permits it. Prevention. If God desires not to permit a thing, He simply prevents it. Judgment. God will, in the end, judge those who ignore or rebel against His sovereign will and will bring eternal condemnation upon them. That is how God expresses his sovereignty through through decision, causation, command, permission, prevention, and judgment. Those are all part of the nature of sovereignty. Remember that the essence of sovereignty is absolute lordship. The ground of sovereignty is creation from nothing, and the expression of sovereignty is basically expressed in terms of control that we just talked about, how he exercises that. The attributes of sovereignty. Knowledge. God is omniscient. Complete knowledge is essential to sovereignty. Only an omniscient God can maintain absolute control over all. God is omniscient. Hebrews 4:13, Job 34:21, 1 John 3:20. He monitors the cosmos. God's omniscience includes his foreknowledge of all events future, including free will choices. This is a supreme expression of divine sovereignty and would seem to be essential to it, especially as it would enable God to prevent actions foreseen by means of foreknown intentions. Sovereignty could possibly be maintained without foreknowledge, since God would have an infinite knowledge of all possible contingencies that could result from any possible events, and thus could be prepared to cope instantly with any contingency as it happens. And so knowledge is an attribute of sovereignty. Power. God is omnipotent. Omnipotence is also essential to sovereignty. God's omnipotence preserves the creation in existence. His omnipotence enables him to do whatever he pleases. Another attribute is wisdom. God is omnisapient. Now, what is wisdom? It is the ability to choose the best possible ends and the best possible means to achieve those ends. The ability to do this involves omniscience and omnipotence. But having these qualities as such does not guarantee that one will choose the best ends and means. Wisdom is thus a separate attribute. It is not in itself essential to sovereignty, but sovereignty without wisdom could be a disaster. God does indeed possess such wisdom. Daniel chapter 2, verse 20, Romans chapter 11, 33, and Romans chapter 16, verse 27. 1 John 5, 3, he is wise in his commands. Romans 8:28, his control and use of man's free decisions are wise. If we believe that God is all wise, we will not sit in judgment upon him or his decisions. Genesis 18:25, Job 22:13, Romans 11:33. This does not rule out prayer in the form of pious complaint. Goodness is an attribute of God's sovereignty. God is omnibenevolent. Goodness is not essential to sovereignty, but sovereignty without goodness would be a terror. Goodness basically is benevolent goodwill toward others. As directed toward persons, it takes the form of agape love, and that's the type of love that God possesses. God possesses such goodness. Psalm 25:8, Psalm 34:8, Psalm 119:68, and Mark 10:18. He cares for his creatures and he rules over them with goodwill. He especially cares for, loves mankind and is good toward them all. Matthew 5:45, Luke 6:35, Acts 14:17, 1 Timothy 6:17, James 1:17. If we believe God is all good, we will love him and trust his providence. And then just briefly, the intimacy of sovereignty is immanence. The work of providence magnifies the immanence of God, just as creation magnifies his transcendence. See Hosea 11:9. Immanence means that God is present within the world, not absent from it. The immanent God is near to every creature. Acts chapter 17, verses 27 through 28. We should learn to practice the presence of God. So, we've talked just briefly today about the sovereign. We've talked about the nature of sovereignty, how the essence of sovereignty is absolute lordship. The ground of sovereignty is creation from nothing. The expression of sovereignty, we talked about those things. We talked about the attributes of sovereignty being knowledge, power, and wisdom, as well as goodness. And we've talked about the intimacy of sovereignty. Next week, we are going to talk about the will of God. So I hope that you will join me again in another lesson on the doctrine of God. Hope you have a great rest of the day, and may God bless you.